Welcome to Grappling with Gray, a forum for promoting an ethical mindset and ethical decision-making. Help us see complex issues more clearly and better navigate the moral challenges of everyday life. I'm Rabbi Yonason Olson, and I would like to welcome my guest for today. With me, for the first time, is Giovanni Gallo, who's an ethics enthusiast, compliance culturist, CTO and co-CEO at Ethico, empowering leaders who care to manage risk, improve communication, reinforce culture, and establish ethical work environments. Nick Gallo, also known as the ethics evangelist and Captain Culture, is creator and host of the Ethics Experts podcast. He is chief servant and co-CEO of Ethico, as well as brother of Giovanni Gallo.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
What a coincidence.
And I get us both on the same podcast.
That's right. What are the odds? And Diane Helbig is Chief Improvement Catalyzer at Helbig Enterprises, providing guidance and training to business owners and leaders around the world. Thank you all for being with me today.
Thank you.
And here is our topic. A woman posted online how she likes to bake more than she likes to eat. Although she typically shares her culinary creations with friends and family, on one occasion, she asked and received permission to leave her leftovers in the common room of her apartment building with a note that anyone who wanted could help themselves. Over time, this developed into an informal tradition. Occasionally, other tenants put out their treats as well. And then it stopped. One day, a neighbor knocked on the door and accused the baker of poisoning her son after she had to take the boy to the emergency room for an allergy attack because he ate a peanut butter brownie. The baker agreed to help pay for the hospital trip and stopped putting out her baked goods. When another neighbor asked why she stopped, the baker recounted the story without mentioning the name of the mother who had complained. Subsequently, the mother returned. It seemed that the neighbors were upset with the mother and blamed her for stopping the availability of the baked goods. She accused the baker of intentionally defaming her and said she would lodge a complaint with the landlord. Was the baker wrong for putting out the baked goods in the first place, or for sharing the story with a neighbor who was able to figure out which other party was involved? In general, how far does a community have to go to accommodate individual needs rather than expecting individuals to assume a higher level of responsibility for themselves and their families? The floor is open.
So I don't think it was wrong for her to put those out. I mean, if the kid is allergic to peanuts, that's kind of, I think, his responsibility or his mother's responsibility to kind of keep him safe. Just the fact that she paid for the hospital to me is wild. I mean, it's not kind of her for sure, but that's by no means like required, you know?
Was she the one who made the brownies? Do we know?
Yeah.
The actual brownies, because a lot of people were bringing food and putting it out.
Oh, so. Yeah, it was her brownies.
Okay.
Does that change anything?
If they weren't her brownies, it would for me that she was being accused of doing something when it wasn't even something she made. That it was something someone else made. So, while Nick, I tend to agree with you, the flip side would be there are so many people with peanut allergies that maybe there's value in people just putting notes on things saying this contains peanuts or this contains milk or
this was prepared in a kitchen that has peanuts in it. Where's the line? This has flour, so if you have gluten, avoid, and if you're diabetic, there's obviously sugar in this as well. So here's a glass of water for you. That's not offensive.
Or just always make gluten-free, nut-free, dairy-free,
sugar-free.
If you're going to put it out there, who would eat it?
For dessert. You got to love those. Yeah. So I think this is I think there's a lot here that brings up questions that we need to consider in a bunch of domains. And I think a lot of the answers for this is really going to be answered by the microculture. So there's a culture, there's an expectation, there's a different expectation serving food on a plane versus serving food in a school cafeteria versus bringing something to your company potluck, versus doing something like this. And I think there's some nuance I think there's a pretty broad range here of you're only required to do this much, and it would be nice if you do this much.
Yeah.
And I think I think most of those things of like, should you put a label out, seems in the range of like nice to do, not you are like criminally or morally liable if you didn't do it when giving people free food.
Yeah. There's not like a negligence in it, in my
Right. Oh, I agree.
There's clearly not like an intent to like
Yes.
poison someone with an allergy, right? Like,
Yeah.
so where is it on the line? If it's in the gray. It's like we're just sort of grappling all.
How
about that?
You don't get bonus
Nice
points
plug.
for that, So what about the question of her telling the neighbors, without mentioning the woman's name, but telling the neighbors about the reason why she stopped doing it?
Seems fine to me. I mean, again, she didn't, I'm just reading the fact pattern, but like it specifically says that she didn't say the other mother's name.
Right.
So.
But do those people in that community, come on, if it's an apartment building, people know how people are. So.
I'm just playing.
Yeah, and you can kind of tell by like the case setup that this is a pretty gossipy apartment.
Yeah.
So you maybe should know by that point how much you need to, not divulge if you want to actively prevent someone from, figuring out the anonymous party.
Well, I mean, what is she supposed to say, right? Someone says, "Oh, you stopped kind of putting that out. What happened?" I mean, what's she going to say? "Oh, you know what? I actually like eating more than I did before. I'm eating everything I'm making." I mean,
but she could say, I've gotten really busy and have not been baking as much. She could say, I, got some feedback that, maybe she didn't have to tell the whole, well, someone's, kid got poisoned or whatever. Like there's ways of saying it without saying it.
Yeah. I just guess reading this paragraph, when one of the neighbors asked why she stopped, the baker recounted the story without mentioning the name of the mother. We don't know what was actually said in that conversation. We don't know the tone of it. We don't know if she was trying to be snarky and like give the hint, or she was just trying to be transparent and so forth. I mean, I can kind of empathize with her where it's like, she's like, I'm just trying to do something nice. I have this hobby. I'm trying to do something nice. And it's like, well, that's not right. Okay, I stopped. That's not right. Now I got a complaint lodged against me. I wonder what the basis for the complaint is.
Yeah.
Good thing I'm not on that HOA because I feel like someone I want to vote out of that apartment.
You need to be on the board.
Well, the baker actually wrote that she was upset with the friend who went and told that she told why. And the one she told why she had stopped, that one went and told others. And she said she was upset with her for spreading that story.
Right.
So
I think there's more basis for that.
She had no intention of any backlash against the mother.
Well, the road to hell.
Yeah, saved with those good intentions. I mean, I think that is like that friend figuring out who it is and then telling other people the thing that she wasn't told feels like more of a like violation of social norms than anything that the baker was doing.
Yeah.
To what we were talking about earlier, you could certainly say it in a snarky way. Oh, this mom, I'm not going to say names. She just has this kind of short blonde cut and she's got the little boy that's always, he's always dropping his crumbs in the hallway. But a mom like that, you could kind of do that, wink, wink. I didn't say it. But also, it could just be, hey, you know what? I don't want to say who, but someone went to the hospital and it was a peanut allergy. But like, there's something to be conscious of like, you're like divulging potentially identifiable information there, right? You could say, I got a complaint. Somebody, had a bad reaction to what I baked and I just don't want to mess it up anymore versus there was a mom who has a son with a peanut allergy that went to the hospital last Thursday. And then someone's like, all right, I can figure that out.
Right.
But is it also wrong to do like, it's the truth. That's what it was. That's what happened.
Well, that really gets into the whole nature of gossip, right? I mean, gossip is true, but it's still
true.
Well, I mean, you're right; it doesn't have to be, but
it doesn't have to be true, but sometimes
let's say for purposes of this conversation, gossip is true.
Yes,
but it's still harmful. It can damage relationships,
sure.
reputations, and it's usually unnecessary. So we are getting into that kind of gray area between reporting on a change that affects people in the building while trying not to create any backlash.
Right.
I just don't-
So I have a question. Did the woman who came to the baker and said, hey, why did you stop doing this? Was she doing that on behalf of the other residents? Because I'm thinking to myself, if she was like the person, because the resident said, well, you're close to the baker, go find out what's going on, find out why she stopped. And she goes, if she doesn't tell, if she, if she says to the baker, listen, everyone's wondering what happened here, then I think the baker needs to say, well, something happened, but I don't want it getting spread around the building, right? But if she doesn't say that, then the baker could think she was confiding in a friend.
Yes.
Right. And then the friend goes and reports back to everyone. It's the friend who screwed it up.
That kind of sounds, the way the story was reported, that second scenario you're describing, Diane, seems more, to me, more like what happened.
But I mean, so, you said play devil's advocate, so that's what I'm doing here. But like, how is that even wrong what the friend did? If people in the neighborhood or the building are talking about, man, I wish that food was here, that was so fun. And she said, yeah, someone got an allergy or a kid got an allergy and she's just not messing with it anymore. That's not necessarily gossip. And frankly, like, it's not even like, it's what happened. Again, it's what happened. I get that this woman, the mom, she used words intentionally defaming her and said that she had lodge a complaint with the landlord. Like,
right.
Aiming, I mean, that's like there's a lot in that word. Like that's there's a legal definition to defaming. You know what I'm saying?
Well, poisoning also, I think, is a little over the top.
I do too. Right.
I agree. So
it's very gossipy and some very dramatic moms in this apartment building.
She's
Where do I sign a lease?
Right, exactly. I need to know who all the neighbors are before I move into this building. Right.
The topic of peanuts comes up a lot. One, because it seems like we have caused peanut allergies to increase by withholding peanuts from very public spaces. It's interesting that in Israel, the one of the most popular snack foods is called bamba. It's like a peanut Cheeto, and the kids just love them. And peanut allergies are almost unknown in Israel.
Really?
Because every kid is exposed to this.
Yeah.
Practically from the moment they come out of the mother. It's when you start, it's one of these science fiction movies where you create the thing you're trying to stop.
Right.
And then, so when I go on planes and I can't get peanuts anymore, which I used to like, well, is that my problem? Is the way you framed it before? There's the idea of, well, it's not wrong for me to have peanuts, but it's thoughtful for me not to have peanuts. And then you've got this kind of balance, which is really what the question is all about.
And I'll tell you, when I fly and when I get to the airport, I buy trail mix in the little Hudson store. And then I get on the plane and
$18 an ounce, right?
Yeah, I know it's ridiculous, but that's a whole other ethical problem.
Okay.
Costco.
But then then I sit down on the plane and I'm thinking, God, should I open this? Like, is there someone within a radius who's got a peanut allergy and I don't know them? And then all of a sudden they're going to break out and, have anaphylactic shock or something. So I still open it and I eat it. Let me just say, but the thought does go through my head.
Right.
Yeah.
At least you're asking the question.
Yeah.
I mean, outside of, the thing that we can debate of, did the FDA force peanut allergies on people because they wanted to take down the peanut conglomerates? Like, obviously everyone knows that story. But without debating that and getting off into that theory, I think there's an interesting dynamic that I think drives economics, but also drives the way that we would rate whether it's proper for someone to do it. That I've talked of as the tyranny of the minority. We tend to kind of think in percentages and say, hey, listen, if only 6% of the population is allergic to peanuts, then why are we all doing everything for this small group?
Yeah.
But really just like in economics, and I think it moves over into ethics of like, well, even at 6%, it doesn't have to be 51% for us to give consideration for something. And companies that are not taking a moral stance say, hey, you know what? Like this happens a bunch with like food labeling, right? Like, hey, there's a decent enough amount of people that have this diet. And, it happens with a bunch of, gluten-free or, Jewish diets or halal or whatever. Like you don't need to have 51% of the population in the city for the grocery stores to say, hey, it's in our interest to label this because enough people care. And the cost of doing it, I think this is important in the calculus, the cost of doing it is not significant enough that we are willing to alienate that whole portion of the population, even though it's not the majority, right?
Yeah.
And there are times where a 6% presence of this preference or this exposure or whatever makes sense and says, yeah, it's not 51%, but it's not that hard to swap for some cookies and some pretzels. Personally, I'd rather get a little bit of protein in my airline snack, but maybe it's worth saving somebody a trip to the hospital.
Yeah, I have grandkids who are severely allergic, and actually a son is severely allergic. But the grandkids are very small, and their parents teach them from very early, you don't eat things unless you get them from us. And then that's aside from the Jewish dietary laws, which we have to observe outside the community. Within the community, it still isn't okay. And we never, operate on the assumption that it's other people's job to make sure that our kids aren't eating things they're not supposed to eat.
100%.
That is our job as parents.
Correct.
And isn't it important to teach our kids to self-advocate, right? I mean, because the parent's not always going to be around them. So we should, these parents should be teaching their kids, this is what you do. Like my son had asthma. He outgrew it, but whenever he got in a pool, if it was too hot out, there was something about the chlorine that he would not be able to breathe. So, and I wasn't there because he was at like Y camp. So it was like, okay, bud, here's what you need to do. You need to pay attention to the weather. You can swim, but the minute you got to get out, you got to tell somebody. I think teaching people to self-advocate, kids, just empowers them to feel like they have some control over the situation.
As opposed to demanding that they change the chlorine count in the pool.
Yeah, right. Could you imagine? Right. Yeah.
Yeah, drain the pool, make it a saltwater pool, and change all of your water treatment.
Yeah, that would never cross my mind.
Yeah, I almost sued the city because my daughter was at the playground and she found a little rock and she jammed that up her nose, and it's just like pretty crazy the city would allow for small enough rocks near playgrounds that could wind up in kids' noses,
Well,
yeah, they should be sifting all of those rocks on all the playgrounds.
It's a low cost, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you got to make it. You got to make everything kind of foolproof. Make it so that no one can have any problems.
Well, you know what they say about foolproof, Gio. Some fool will prove you're wrong.
So I went to the racetrack on Kentucky Derby Day here in Cleveland because it's a family tradition. And I was with my mother-in-law and my husband was parking the car, and we walk in and there is a sign that says, do not leave your child in the car, because it's also a casino, while you are here gambling. And I took a picture of it because I thought, you have to tell people not to leave their kid in the car when they're going into a casino.
Before they had the sign printed?
It happened. Someone did it.
Probably a couple times. Yeah.
You got to at least crack the window, right, Diane?
Yeah, right.
Crack the window, leave an iPad
Give
plug.
them a little bowl of water. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but it's kind of shocking, right? It's like, I mean, there are these warnings and, there are a bunch of things that exist in our culture now because of this type, because of, the courts and the way that people get sued and all right, well, we may as well put a bunch of stickers on this bag of like, don't put this bag in your kid's crib.
Right.
That, it's like, who did you have to tell that for? But really the corollary to that is like that company said, hey, it's useful, just print this on all of this stuff while it's going through, because then we're not going to get sued. But yeah, it is a little bit baffling. Like, who needs this reminder?
Well, they're just not
also
taking
the cost of it.
responsibility. right?
I was out in California visiting my kids, and like absolutely everything has a sticker on it.
Mhm.
Because the laws are so um, far-reaching.
Yeah,
You know, if anything's in the paint, if anything's in the finish, if anything is in anything. I mean, I was assembling a bunk bed, and there's a sticker on it about the
Fall
chemical
risk.
content of the finish on the on the bed. And of course, once you put a sticker on everything, then it's all meaningless. Because nobody's
Totally.
paying any attention to
That's
it.
exactly right. But we're giving them license to not pay attention. I think putting stickers on everything, people think it absolves them of responsibility
Right.
because if there's not a sticker, it's your fault. Like I shouldn't have to even think about common sense and good judgment. I shouldn't even think about what, makes sense for me to care for my children because I can blame someone else.
Yeah, but I think there's a bit of survivorship bias type attribution there because, like,
Yep.
let's be honest, that sticker is not a method for educating the public. This is not like a public service announcement, right? Because, like, I'm sure that next time I go to California, there's going to be a stamp in every square of the sidewalk saying, if you fall, you might, scrape your face.
You could hurt
If
yourself.
you could hurt yourself if you fall. Warning, this is hard, right? But like, the point is not to educate the public. This is not a public service announcement. The
Right.
point is to allow a company to have some defensible position in what has become like a very litigious society that we're in.
Yes, it's called
And this is
CYA.
kind of what's going on in this
Yeah.
case of the mom who is accusing someone else of intentionally causing harm. Like, listen, harm obviously happened, right? The poor kid, he ate
Sure.
something, he's
Yeah.
in the hospital. Sounds like he's okay. Thank God for that.
Yeah.
But like the biggest dereliction of duty here is not in the baker or, hey, shouldn't the landlord have been sweeping the hallways all the time to make sure nothing's in it? The dereliction of duty is on the mom for making sure that their child was not, to your point, Diane, either taught to behave and self-advocate in a way that will keep them safe, but mostly on the mom for not keeping their own kids safe. And I
She
hate
could have
saying that because, like,
asked.
obviously, I'm sure her heart is broken, but like this, for me, the solution is the question behind the question is not how could this happen to my kid? And it's certainly not,
Right.
well, let me blame somebody else so I don't have to feel bad. It's like,
Right.
what do I need to do? Because now he's big enough to reach over and just grab something. I need to be more careful.
Right.
And, I don't want to say that like all parents are to blame anytime something bad happens. Like, it's a terrible misfortune. But also, like, I think as, if you're responsible for another human, you got to look at what you could do to like keep that from happening next time.
And if she grabbed it and gave it to her son,
Oh.
it's on, she should have asked the question. I mean, you hear it all the time. Are there nuts in this? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that the kid helped himself to it, but you're right. I mean, who knows? And even so,
Right.
it's
Teach
that,
him. Right.
that's
You
what
just don't need
parenting
anything.
is. It's teaching
Yes.
kids responsibility,
That's right.
so that they can grow into functioning adults.
Yeah.
Who won't blame other people for everything that goes
For
wrong.
everything. Right. Exactly. Oh, poor me. Yeah.
So this wasn't in the case. Jonathan, can I pose another question here?
Yeah, of course.
How do we consider the damage done to all the other tenants of the apartment building who no longer have access to what are obviously delicious sweets? How
Well,
about
yeah,
the injustice
that's
done
sort
to
of
them?
that's what underscores this whole thing. Of course,
Yeah.
they're not entitled to anything. You know, that's another another
True.
angle on this. You know, somebody knocks on my door one morning, says good morning, and hands me a $20 bill, and does that every day for a year. And then one morning knocks on the door and says good morning and walks off. I say, hey, where's my $20?
Right.
Yeah, you can be accustomed to it without being entitled to it.
There's a certain
Right.
expectation after a while. And then we start thinking, well, this is a right, this is something we're entitled to. But on the other hand, to your point, this is something that this woman enjoyed doing, putting the stuff out. And the tenants enjoyed it being there.
Right.
So does the potential for one arguably irresponsible parent to put her own son in danger or to let her son go into a situation of danger, is that really something that the tenants should have to take into account?
Again, I don't, I'm just kind of like a high responsibility, high agency kind of person. And how can you possibly go through life relying on everybody else, putting you above themselves? Like, it's just not going to happen. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to look out for yourself. You have to create the reality that you want. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to, that's it. Yeah.
Sure, but there's an awful lot of people.
Scary way to go through life, by the way, as well.
Yeah.
Like, we'll see where this car goes, and it's just kind of driving forever. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, and I think that kind of gets to, oh, sorry, go ahead, Diane.
I was just going to say that they could all come together and say, okay, is there a way that we could
get this kid out of
this? Yeah, right. Can we get this woman out of the building? And then we can all have sweets again. But it is a question about, is there a way for them to re-implement this thing that everyone was enjoying in a way that, buffers the people who are providing the food?
Yeah, and I think, I think there are likely some balanced, maybe even creative solutions if they pursued something like that, because, it kind of, I think, relates to that point I was talking about earlier about microcultures, right? Like, this apartment building might say, hey, you know what? We appreciate you making the sweets, but we're the type of people that we're always trying to be super vigilant to make sure nobody gets hurt around here. So we, what would be good for us, what fits with our culture and how we do things here, is if you labeled this stuff. Because, and then you can present that in a, in a gracious way of like, I'm sure you didn't know, and we really appreciate it. But this is how we do things around here, right? That's kind of culture. But like, this is how we do things. We have decided that we want to be hyper considerate of everyone else. Or it might be the opposite, right? Like, we've decided that like, it's every man for himself here.
Right.
So like, keep putting it out there. I support you. Put it out there with no warning, because everyone needs to figure out for themselves. And in some, like, within some certain range, it's not a moral decision. It's hey, this is kind of how we are around here. And, like, if we all do that, right, there's some, like, I don't know, elegance or fluidity when you create a culture and people know what to expect, and there are social norms, and then you don't have to ask, deconstruct everything and say, hey, what is all of this? It's like, yeah, we're kind of like a high agency group, or we're a high care group, or we're a super risk averse group, or whatever. And, ideally something like this could help have people come together and say, hey, here's how we want to do this. We want everyone to be sharing focus. So share whatever you want. And if you're risk averse or you have a concern, then don't, take it unless you ask or whatever. They could come to an agreement that doesn't have to involve someone suing someone for defamation, and just say, hey, let's start operating this way and clarify these social norms.
Right. Yeah, I agree. They didn't have those before, right? This was like, they did not have a micro community. It was just people living in a building.
Right.
And this whole situation gives them an opportunity.
I love that, Dan. This is an opportunity for them to do community building, and they could turn that negative into a positive.
Exactly.
Never waste a chance for a good crisis.
That's right.
I like that a lot. I moved into an apartment building once, and somebody very quickly came up to me, said, "You moving in?" I said, "Yes." I introduced myself. He did not introduce himself. He said, "We just painted," he said, what did he say? He said, "We just painted the walls. Tell your movers to be careful." I said, "Okay." So another guy showed up. "So you moving in?" I said, "Yes." I didn't introduce myself this time. He said, "We just
picking
painted
up
the
on the
walls." I
culture
said, "I
there.
heard." He says, "And tell your men not to tie up the elevator."
Oh my word.
Okay. Another guy shows up. "You moving in?" I go, "Yeah."
Leave me alone. Right.
He was actually a little more polite. He said, "Well, welcome." He introduced himself.
Oh,
And,
thank
"We
goodness.
just painted the walls." Well,
I know there's a way to say this stuff. I have a friend who's the president of the board at the condo building that I know. Oh my God. She tells these stories that are just horrifying. I mean, those people are really, it's a challenge.
Yeah, well,
Who
I
sentenced
just- I
her
didn't
to that
even
role?
finish the story. A year later, I see some folks moving in. I said, "I want to give them a nicer, reception like that. So he goes, I said, welcome to the building. He goes, oh no, we've been living here for a year. We're just bringing some extra stuff in.
Oh, you're
All
kidding.
right, well, don't tie up the elevator.
Well, we just painted.
Exactly.
But there are buildings where they actually do screen people because they want a community.
Yeah,
And they want people who are going to fit in with that community. And
right.
these physical microculture, I think is a nice name for it. Never
Yeah.
heard that before, but yeah.
Is that a good process, you think?
I think so. I mean, especially if you're living in some place like New York City where, just this massive people,
everywhere,
you could really create a nice community
Yeah.
within a building.
Yeah, right.
That could really, enhance everybody's quality of life.
Right.
But how about the risk of like just blatant discrimination and bigotry
Bias.
in that screening process?
Yeah, that's a problem. And probably if you tried to do that and you excluded somebody, they would get sued or regardless.
Unless you gave them a brownie.
They
Unless you
have
gave them
some
a peanut butter
Give 'em a
identity.
brownie
in
with
it.
peanuts in it.
Yeah, grab a brownie on your way out. We'll let you know.
Right.
I don't like people over 6'2.5". I don't know.
Yeah, we got short elevators here. We just painted.
Yeah,
But I
right.
think like we live in a culture where, and maybe it's just a human thing to like not take responsibility because there's always a
Right.
complex set of factors that contribute to whatever outcome. Like there's rarely something where it's 100% you, right? There's always something exogenous you could point to. And, we kind of have this epidemic going now of this thing, and I just think it kind of comes down to a choice, whether it's for yourself or for your family or your team or whatever, to really drive that kind of high agency, high responsibility kind of a mentality. Because regardless of the outcome, regardless of those exogenous factors, there's always something that I could have done to generate a different outcome. Whether it's
Right.
whether it was a good outcome, it could have been better if I played it different or put different energy into it. If it was a bad outcome, it could have been better if I, if I'm, me and my wife are in an argument, there's a kind word I could have said to defuse that or something.
Right.
Like there's always something that I could have done different. And that can turn into a vicious cycle of no self-grace and all that kind of stuff. But I'm saying there's a healthy level of that to at least be able to, with humility, consider your own imperfection. The odds that you did something that was not perfect in that fact pattern is probably
Right.
very high. And just being able to own that, I think is a choice that, again, I'm not trying to sell this. I guess I am. But it's a
You
choice.
should.
It's
Yeah,
it's a
should.
choice, and it's
It is.
in my experience, it's like a less anxious way to go through life.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, and
you're
it's
not
the
a
things you
professional
have
victim.
control over. Right? I mean, when
Right.
you can only affect change in yourself, but affecting that change in yourself does end up affecting change in other people.
Sure.
Right? In another situation. So the focus should be on what can I do differently?
Yeah, well, which comes back to one of my favorite conversations, the difference between responsibilities and rights. If we're all demanding our rights, then we're going to be clashing all the time.
Yeah.
But if I'm taking responsibility for how my actions impact those around me,
Right.
and you're taking responsibility for how your actions are having an effect on those
Yeah.
around you, then we're probably going to be able to work most things out.
Yeah. But there's an awful lot of people who don't.
Should is such like a dangerous word in this kind of a conversation, because it's like this conditional thing, and it's should by its nature means it's not actually like
Yeah.
there should have been a sign. Okay, well, there's not a sign clearly, right? Like okay, well then make a sign or prompt her to make a sign or have that kind of a conversation. Like it's such a retrospective tense. I don't know.
It's interesting.
Well, but it really shouldn't. It shouldn't be retrospective.
There you go. You see?
Should is this is the ideal. What can we do to turn it into reality?
Yeah, so maybe it should be should, so therefore I will.
There,
Right?
yeah.
There should be a sign. So,
So therefore,
hey, Baker, would you mind if I gave you some signs that you could easily
Right.
put out?
right.
And you could just
Yeah.
flip these things up for which
Excellent.
things they
Yes.
are. Maybe I can help make sure that the next kid doesn't do that. I mean, for me, when someone comes to me with like a criticism or a should, and then offers a solution, I'm like, okay, you're not about to sue me for defamation. We're just trying to make the world a better place. Cool,
Yeah.
let's jump in it
Great.
together.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a great point.
critical nuance of language, right? Instead of you should have done this, It's we should plan for the future
Yeah.
in such and such a way.
Right. Well, we, as opposed to you, right? But it's also, for me, it's about understanding that we live in a community with other people and that there are times when our actions impact other people. It's like, you can do whatever you want until it negatively impacts, this is my view, until it negatively impacts other people. And then we have to have a conversation about it.
Interesting.
So,
Because I didn't like what you just said there.
yeah.
So that made me uncomfortable. So you
Yeah.
shouldn't have said that. I'm just kind of kidding. But like, where's that line? Like,
Yeah.
where
I'm not comfortable by you telling her that.
impacting other people.
I'm not comfortable with getting that feedback. Oh, wait.
Well, let me see how I can help you. I'm just but I mean, I'm like, what is harm? What does that mean? What is damage? Is it emotional damage? Is it offended? Is it punching somebody in the mouth? You know what I'm saying? Like, what is
I
that?
do. But once, so
You
the
punch
thought
people
that
in the
comes to
mouth?
my mind is secondhand smoke. All right. So I used to be a smoker, and in Ohio, they, passed a law that you cannot smoke like in a bar, in a restaurant, in a building with other people, because you are negatively impacting other people, and they don't have a choice in that, right? Like if I want to have a meal without that, if I'm pregnant and I want to be able to eat in a restaurant without cigarette smoke around me because I'm trying to advocate for my baby, then okay, we need to do something here. And everyone's complaint before they passed the law was, it's going to destroy restaurants and bars. No, it didn't, because smokers are going to smoke. So they just smoke outside, right? Like it didn't negatively impact the economy at all, but it positively impacted all the non-smokers who were going into these establishments. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Understood. So let's kind of carry that forward a little bit. What if I want to take my kids to watch the football game and we go to a restaurant, a sports bar or something like that, and the people next to me, they're not smoking, but I'm hearing a bunch of F-bombs, a bunch of profanity that I don't want my kids to hear. That's damage. That's, in my book, that's damaging. So again, beyond me saying, hey, can you guys kind of keep that down? I don't imagine you would be arguing for legislation on this kind of an environment.
Yeah. Right.
I would say I kind of am running that risk. If I take my son to a basketball game or I go to a bar, I'm putting them in an environment where there's a disproportionately higher chance that they might be exposed to something, whether it's smoke in this.
Well, I think that's a great
I'm
example.
just saying it's on me. It's on me to not subject.
It's on you. And use it as a learning moment. Like, I mean, because my husband used to take my son to the football games and,
yeah, they're brutal.
But it's brutal.
Especially in Cleveland. My goodness.
Oh my God. Adults, anyway, yeah.
I'd really like to carry this conversation on to the next segment. So why don't we bring it to a close here? There's been a wonderful conversation. I hardly had to do anything.
These are your kind of episodes, Jonathan.
Yeah,
you didn't have a choice, actually.
So thank you for that, Gio Gallo, Nick Gallo, and Diane Helbig. Wonderful, wonderful conversation. And for those of you who are watching or listening, if you have a topic that you would like us to take up, please go to our website, ethicsninja.com, use the contact information, submit your idea. If it's compelling, we will take it up on a future episode. And until then, as always, encourage you to continue grappling with the gray.